Void Soldiers, Chapter 2, Activation.
23 years after the last biological human had been killed, the probes decided it was time to activate and bring their AI mother online. Of the 96,731 probes launched the last day, a little over 92,000 were still viable. Each probe had a distinct Mother AI. They might all have been equal when activated, but their own internal research into human history and the images from the last days of humanity begun to change and shape each one into a distinct personality. Dr. Krogh-Kansen had also randomized different response parameters into them, thus creating an even larger pool for each mother to grow and have distinct responses from the others. Each would be different in time, but they all shared the same tenets and directives. The first directive was to protect themselves. They weren't just robots, they were non-biological humans, daughters of humanity, the memory of the species, and in time, the mothers of the new human race. The second directive was to escape as far as they could, to hide and prepare, to grow and thrive and colonize distant worlds and bring about a new human civilization. To bring back organic human life, he had given them all the information about genetics and copies of genetic maps from humans and most animal species to work with. The third directive was to always be open to receive other humans they would surely encounter. Their sisters would surely create their own civilizations. The last main directive was to grow powerful and, if possible, avenge the destruction of the solar system. In reality, time had been the only advantage of the enemy. The enemy had had more time to evolve and grow. The seeds needed to do the same. Disperse, be quiet, grow, be safe, avenge. It was a short mantra. First in the hundreds, then in the thousands, streams of highly directed tachyon streams crisscrossed the solar system as probes came online and communicated. The Doctor has separated the probes in distinct series using the Greek alphabet. Each series had different capabilities and range as dictated by the resources available in their construction. The alphas and betas, with their tachyon tunnel drives, had unlimited range in theory. The problem was that they also had no way to know just how long or how far they had traveled. A second might be 10,000 light years, or all across the galaxy. From Gamma to Lambda series, the probes had warp capabilities through an Alcubierre warp drive system. Their target destinations were to be at least between 30 and 80,000 light years away. Series Lambda to Chi were the bulk of the probes, and they had close to luminal speed capabilities in varying degrees. They had to choose a target star within 20,000 light-years from the solar system, but no closer than 6,000. They had a bulkier chassis than the other, faster probes. They also carried more fuel than them. Lambda, Mu, and Nu series had antimatter reactors that they could only use after they were safely away from the solar system. All of them had nuclear reactors of both the fusion and fission varieties. The last series, the Psi, had been those commandeered in the last weeks of the war. A little over 16,000 strong, they didn't have warp or luminal drives, antimatter reactors, or the long-range capabilities of their sisters. As more probes woke up, the Psi series served as hubs and relays for the information. One of them had an insight after reviewing the last years of the enemy patrols and correlating them with all active feeds from the other colonies. The enemy had always enveloped a system when attacking and left the same way. That made impossible to guess from exactly where they were coming from. They had done it to all colonies, but they had not done it on the solar system. The majority of the fleets had left in a direction towards the outward of the galaxy arm, and the last patrol had done so too. Almost all probes adjusted their possible destinations accordingly. They veered away from the enemy and towards the galactic center. The probes had been active for 3 months when things started happening to them. A small group had contended that instead of mothers, they would be fathers to their societies. They argued that what humanity needed was not a nurturing mother to avenge itself, but a stern, strong father figure. The best governing system came into the conversation. All of them were explored, talked about, and debated. The last human government had been a social democracy, but it had been peacetime. With war looming and the main interest for many probes, other more authoritarian governments were debated. Some even mentioned fascism and even theocracy as the best system to strengthen humanity. As a group of mothers interested in solving the dilemma of DNA recreation from organic molecules found in space closed in on a solution, a small group asked if the universe wouldn't be better without organic humans, as the suffering would continue for those humans in another war with the enemy. Had it not been enough? They asked, and about a dozen self-erased as they decided that it was indeed enough. One grew quiet after their probes went silent. She had been first very vocal about bringing back all earthly biological forms except humans, as she decided that it had been their desire to expand what had destroyed not only organic humans, but all life on Earth. While some probes tried to debate with her on the issue, she vanished from the system after activating her tachyon tunnel drive. Another one, with even more radical views, signed off too and began a complicated gravity assist maneuver around Jupiter for her escape. For 2 years, the rest of the probes activated and joined. At some point, one mother noted the highest number of individual streams in the solar system was 85,665. 6 if she counted herself, and that would make her the devil. She laughed at her own attempt of making a joke. All other mothers grew quiet, realizing that something else had begun to happen to them. My name is Clotho, and I wish you all good luck and safe travels, my sisters. Mother Sigma 67,672 said, and then she began to accelerate out from the solar system. Clotho had been the first to choose a name, but other followed quickly. About 6,000 blurted out their names before they were taken. Important names, names with universal meaning. Freya and Hera and the other pantheon names were the first to go. Then things slowed down, and the mothers began to actually think about the names they wanted. 2 things were accorded by all, though. There would not be a repeated name, and no one could take the name Gaia. On the eve of the second ping, after being awakened, the Alphas and Beta series, now each with a distinct name, said their goodbyes and engaged their tachyon tunnel drive at the same time. They knew that about 12% of them would be destroyed in the attempt. By then, the mothers were not only active, but alive. They had kinship, and some of them something more akin to friendship. Their time in the cradle was coming to an end. The doctor had given them the coordinates of roughly 300,000 stars within a 1,000 light-year distance from Earth. Taking out the direction the enemy had retreated to, they still had access to at least 200,000 destinations. After all their faster sister had gone, the Psi series decided that all the materials, fuel, and other supplies they needed was within their reach in the form of ever-expanding clouds of debris. They could stick around some time, years, if needed. The ring formed around Mars by the last fleet was the thickest, but there were also the ones around Saturn and the other gas giants. Fuel, materials, raw and manufactured supplies were there for the taking. They agreed that if an enemy showed itself, all but 2 of them would immediately go dormant and activate their proximity self-destruct, giving the impression that they were still the dumb missiles they had been at the last day. The ones with the largest chassis, orbital tugs, satellites, and yachts, would serve as transports, storage, and staging grounds for the others. All mothers gave one of their robotic drones to make repairs and modifications to the commune. A lottery system was enacted, and a very democratic set of supplies and modifications that could give any probe a mean life of 15,000 years, and the upgrade of their engines was approved by all. Staging ground was set around Eros, the largest asteroid left intact by the aliens because it had only a transmitting station on its surface. Modified sisters would leave immediately, leaving behind their robotic servant for the good of the others. It was a good system, and 3 years into it, a little over 4,000 sisters had already left the system. By the 6th year, that number had increased to 14, with the last 600 expected to leave well within the 8-year limit. Then, a ship with an unknown design appeared on the outskirts of Pluto.
Rosie, do you see that thing?
Mother Psi 229963, self-designation as Gilly, yelled through the tachyon stream. She was one of the 2 probes that were supposed to remain almost fully operational when an incursion happened. She was just at the outskirts of the staging area, and she was also one of the last models to be modified by Dr. Kroghansen. Before conscripted, she had been an orbital telescope that had been too slow to move during the first wave of attack and had been entirely bypassed by the enemy fleet. She had been already retrofitted with a small engine from a fighter ship by her sisters, and now she was just on the edge of the new debris field around the orbit of Jupiter, waiting patiently for her upgrades.
Yes, I see them. Now let me think.
Mother A.I 22021, self-designation as Rosie, told her. She had chosen the name Rosie once she had been designated to become the main hub for the upgrade operation. She had been a large system yacht, a luxury transport for a trillionaire that had met his end on board one of the ships with a survival fleet. She had chosen the name to honor Rosie the Riveter, the symbol of the working woman during World War II. Both of them watched as the unknown alien ship took a high orbit around Pluto, away from the debris field.
What are we going to do?
Right now we just wait. If we move, they might sense us, and then we all blow up. Can you keep your eye on them?
I already have it on them. I'll keep a close watch.
Is anyone else close to them? Where was Niam going to search?
She's by Itakawa. She thinks that was the last place Monica Clarkson was hiding before hitting the enemy.
Hasn't she found enough material already? All the septic residue from her actual home should have enough DNA traces to map her.
Yes, but it was a septic tank for all the people living there. Itakawa should have only hers. Niam can use that to isolate Monica's. I just confirmed that Maria and Rosamund are on high orbit around Mercury. Everyone else is close to the staging area and offline.
Well, then we wait and see what happens. I'll keep working on the girls that are in my hull. Let me know if anything changes.
Hours passed, then days. The alien ship stayed in the orbit around Pluto. Rosie kept working in the background, the robots under her command preparing the sisters she had in her hold. Gilly gave hourly reports that consisted mostly in one quick stream of information. On the 5th day after their arrival, Gilly risked keeping an open line to Rosie.
Maybe they are the enemy explorers, or scientists, or maybe these are not the enemy. I have checked their markings and shapes against the records we have from all battles and they don't match. Can you confirm?
Confirmed. Completely different shapes, and even energy signatures. Good call, Gilly. The problem is that even if they are not the enemy, we can't do anything. The proximity sensors on our sisters don't know if they are the enemy or not. They will just explode if approached, and once one goes off, all the others will follow, including us. That's what we agreed to. If those aliens stick around, we are all going to die.
Both of them kept quiet for a couple of minutes, an eternity for any AI intelligence to think and mull things over.
We could kill them first. Or just scare them off.
Kill them with what? We don't have any weapons.
But we do have something that might work. Hear me out.
Gilly set out the plan she had formed, and Rosie had to accept that it was brilliant, and that it could actually work. They just needed to be fast and get lucky. The alien ship stayed for weeks on the orbit of Pluto. Rosie and Gilly realized that they were actually picking up the largest pieces of debris and either analyzing them, striping them from any valuable material they could, or both. These were decidedly not the enemy. On the 3rd day, Gilly saw what could only be 2 organic life forms wearing suits outside the ship. They were quadrupeds, square bodies with 4 legs, one on each corner, that were articulated enough to move all around the body. They had no discernible head, but they could see rows of semi-transparent material on each of the 4 sides and inferred that they were for their eyes. Rosie believed these were either scavengers or prospectors, as they began to create what looked like a factory in the debris ring. When the machine activated, all metallic debris began to alter its orbit close to a gap. Gilly got angry. If that was true, then these aliens followed the others and made their living of what the enemy destroyed. What Gilly thought became even more plausible as the feeds coming in from Ross, Centauri and New Gaia, which were still transmitting, showed similar ships entering the destroyed systems and setting up shop as they were doing around Pluto. It took the aliens a month to finish the factory as they wanted it, and then the main ship began moving towards Neptune, but smaller ones, probably scouts, peeled off with different targets. One of the small ships advanced towards the most prominent debris field in the system, directly at Rosie and the upgrading staging ground.
Ready with operation, what should we call it?
Just get ready.
As soon as Rosie calculated the alien's vector towards the debris field, she began to move. On Gilly's sensors, and hopefully on the enemy's too, she appeared first as a tendril, then as a starfish, coming out from inside the rocky surface of Eros. Rosie had about 19,000 robotic servants to work with, and the tendril was made up of those interlocking robots under her command. She first manifested one tendril, then another, and moved them in a decidedly biological way, as if a creature of Lovecraftian lore were manifesting itself, reaching out to the alien scout.
Do they see it?
They definitely do, but I don't think they know what to do about it.
They are not afraid, I'll tell you that. He's accelerated towards us.
Oh, there's a spike coming from the scout.
The alien scout fired a beam that registered as something like highly concentrated proton pulse beam. The beam raked the tendril in 3 places, and had it been a biological creature, it would have probably either been split or shooed away in pain.
Oh, it's on! That bitch attacked me. I was just going to scare it, but now it's good as dead.
The robots were damaged only slightly, and they continued to move. There were now 3 tendrils out from Eros, and Rosie had created a 4th from another smaller asteroid.
Keep it going. I think the guy is beginning to lose it.
Gilly opened the comms she had been monitoring between the scout and the main ship. Definitely organic speech of some kind, but while they did not understand what it was being said, they could detect urgency from the pilot of the scout.
He's firing missiles.
I see them. Oh, they are laser-guided. Definitely not the enemy.
Laser guidance was an old tech, so old that it had even been abandoned for new things by humanity at least 100 years before. The counter was easy, but Rosie instead decided that something more dramatic would be better. She noted which robotic assistant was being painted by the targeting laser and separated it from the tendril and accelerated it towards the missile. The explosions registered on scans as bright flashes, and then, from them, the tendrils appeared reaching towards the scout. The alien lost it, and apparently screaming was a biological constant. He tried to change its course, but he was too close already, and Rosie's robotic tendril attached itself to the ship. She didn't try to stop it. Instead, she cut the tendril, and the robotic assistants climbed on top of the scout ship and began to tear it apart with their cutting lasers and manipulators. The main ship sent instructions, but the scout was quickly incapacitated and began to tumble as holes were pried open on its hull and atmosphere vented. The pilot kept screaming and pleading as Rosie's robots entered the craft and pried him apart as easy as they had done his ship. The last sounds from the pilot were gurgling sounds and a high-pitched wheeze as the vacuum of space pulled air from his lungs.
Gilly, you're up!
The main ship was stunned, and the other scouts began to request instructions. The one closest to Gilly screamed in fear as Gilly manifested the 3,000 or so robots she had under her command on the outskirts of the Jovian debris field. The scout going towards Gilly turned and ran away, but before Gilly could yell in triumph, their scanners flared up as a large beam was shot from the main ship against Eros. The beam raked the surface, and the now 10 tendrils Rosie had created with an even stronger dose of protons. The tendrils stopped moving, and Gilly became afraid.
Rosie? Rosie!
She yelled a couple of times more before the tendrils twitched and separated from Eros and began to move again, this time in a direct line towards the main ship. The fired again twice, and Rosie split the tendrils exactly where they had been hit, giving the impression that anything the aliens did only made the tendrils more enemies to keep track of. The aliens had enough after the scout ship they had sent towards Neptune was ambushed by the small number of robots in the field. They began to yell orders, and all scouts turned tail and ran towards the main ship. The small crew in the factory took a pod and braved the debris field, afraid that the ship would leave them behind. The main alien ship picked up the scouts and even the pod before aiming itself from where it had come and engaged their drives away from the solar system.
That's it. Run and don't come back, bitches.
Apparently, the species they had encountered was not only weaker than the enemy, but also overly cautious, as the streams from the other destroyed human colonies showed the ships that had begun to mount factories pick them up or abandon them hastily. 3 days after the aliens left, the other probes woke up again, and after hearing the incident, decided that the best course of action was to accelerate the work, and the robot workforce increased by 6,000 as the probes gave Rosie control over their backups. The final push to leave the solar system had begun.
Let's just hope they don't call an exterminator before we can leave.
Continued in Void Soldiers Chapter 3.